Green, and he's known for his work in City and Color, and of course, Alexis on Fire! Yeah, good fans! City and Color and Alexis on Fire. Man, I grew up listening to that. So cool. They are actually celebrating, get this, 20 years? 20 years since debuting the solo album. Incredible. He's joined by Polaris Prize-nominated rapper and broadcaster Shad. Give it up for Shad as well. They will speak on a candid reflection on staying true. This is important. Staying true to your voice in the music landscape, also while evolving in your career. 20 years in Canadian music is a feat. That is fantastic and should be celebrated, right? So without further ado, friends, put your hands together and please welcome Shad and Dallas! Hey Dallas, nice to see you.
How you guys doing? Dal, I'm glad to be here with you. I'm glad to get to celebrate you.
Thank you. It's very nice of you to say.
Before we became friends and toured together and stuff like that, I was a fan, and you know that. I'm an admirer of music, so I'm just glad to be a part of celebrating this milestone for you, and also hopefully for younger artists here, share some of your experience that you've collected.
I appreciate that.
On that note, I want to start, if you can remember back when we were young men, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the experience of putting out these songs? Alexis was out already, and as I understand, sometimes started with these songs being leaked online and getting some of that feedback. If you can remember 2005, getting some of that response to these songs, how did that feel putting that out?
Well, to be honest, at first it felt very disorienting that people were discovering these demos I had made in my parents' basement. I've said this many times, but I've never been good at the internet. So the idea that people from my hometown were putting these demos I had made up onto sort of file sharing sites was very foreign to me.
Okay, so you hadn't put them out.
No,
okay.
this is like, and these are songs that I had, the band that I was in before Alexis on Fire was called Helicon Blue, and that was with my cousin Nicholas, rest in peace, and my friend Marcel, who was a skateboarding buddy, and I had been writing songs in high school. I started writing when I was probably 15, and my cousin was very industrious as far as wanting to learn how to record as well, so he stole this, he borrowed this digital 8-track from his high school and bring it to my parents' basement, and we started learning how to use it. So we recorded the Helicon Blue, this 4-song EP on it in my parents' basement. But I was always writing, so I was writing a lot of songs that were just me and a guitar, and Nicholas would record them. And then I started playing kind of solo shows around St. Catharines as well, before Alexis, sort of in the midst of my other band. So a lot of these songs were just these rough basement songs, Some of them were versions that would end up on sometimes. But so, long story long, once Alexis starts touring and people start kind of finding out about what I do, I think people from St. Catharines started just uploading these songs onto LimeWire and Napster and all that stuff. Because you realize too, it's like, looking back, it's like we're starting in the ashes of the old music industry.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean, right? Yeah. And I think maybe we didn't realize it at that time, but this was going to be the future, was online and people just sharing whatever they like, and you discover it that way. So, I'd play a show in Vancouver with Alexis, and a kid would come up to me and say, what's with these Dallas Green songs? And I'd be like, what are you talking about? And they'd be like, oh, there's this song and it's this. I'm like, how did you hear that? And then obviously the conversation goes to the file sharing and stuff like that. So the genesis of me trying to, or wanting to make a solo record, is from those conversations with people who were listening to what I considered shitty versions of these songs. And I kind of thought, well, why don't I go and record good studio versions? Because now I had been doing that, right? Alexis, we had made 2 records. I started to kind of realize that this was going to be, well, I was trying to make this my life. Recording, writing. So my friend Julius Buddy, who had produced the second Alexis record, him and I decided to go in for a week, not a week, a couple of days, and record 6 songs, which then sort of became what I called the Death of Me EP.
Okay.
Which were 6 songs that would end up being on sometimes, you know? And I went and did a little tour by myself, and we just, you know, we had made 1,000 copies of this EP ourselves, and I sold them all at these shows, and that sort of then became, oh, well, maybe I should like record a few more and make a record, right? So that's kind of how it all became. It turned into City and Color and became this solo project, you know? But it was just, it's what I have been doing since I was a teenager, you know?
Did you already have the confidence back then? I guess what I'm getting at is that the validation that happens when you're younger in your career. It's a thing I become more sensitive to when I talk to younger artists, and I'm thinking about some of the people that are out here, because it's easy for me at this stage to say, oh, make music for yourself, who cares what the people think? But if I'm honest and I think back to when I started, it mattered a lot to get that validation.
Oh.
So I'm curious, you know, just about that, getting that feedback, or when you got your confidence to put out these very personal songs.
That's an interesting question, because I don't really know what it was that spurred me to be so open about how I felt in a song. You know, I think I had always been writing from that perspective when I was writing a song by myself. But I think connecting with people at such a young age was very helpful, but also coming from Alexis was very helpful, because, you know, when Alexis started to gain some popularity, it was so surprising to us that this strange music was striking a chord, pun intended, with other people. So that, first of all, gave me the confidence that, you know, people were already liking this weird thing I was doing.
Yeah.
So creating from my heart just felt very natural, you know? I don't know about the confidence thing. I think there's a strange, I'd like to think that I'm confident, but I also feel like I live in and have continued to live in a paradox of, like, I'm deeply uncomfortable with myself and second guess myself all the time, but also at the same time, I think I can achieve anything. I really do, and I have always sort of felt that, like, when I was younger and I would start to try to write for myself, I didn't care if you liked it or not, you know? I cared if I liked it. If it moved me, then I felt like I had done the job, because then once it leaves you, you don't have any control over it.
Yeah.
Right? So there was something about that, the confluence of events of Alexis, and feeling supported in that my decisions were being heard, you know? And then I think because of the fact that there was people listening to all these songs I had written when I was young, and that they were connecting with them, I thought, okay, well, it's a platform to go from there, you know? Like, I'll never forget when we first met. Do you remember when we first met at that, I forget where it was like a little festival in, maybe it was outside of Waterloo or something.
Okay.
This was a long time ago, and I had known Maddie.
Yep.
And he introduced me to you, and you were one of the first people that came up to me to tell me that you were digging these solo songs.
Well, I was going to bring up, I think you played at the Embassy in London, Ontario, the Embassy Hotel.
Yes.
That's gone now.
Absolutely.
And I still remember the feeling in that room. There was all this excitement around these songs that we'd all stolen from the internet. We were all excited about it. And the way that I sum up the feeling in that room, the excitement in that room, is I say, you felt like one of them, but no, you were one of them, but you felt like one of us.
Sure.
In the sense that, like, we could tell this is a world-class talent, but there's something we recognize. You know what I mean? You're another kid from Southern Ontario. There's so much that's familiar there.
Right.
So, my next question, part of this whole journey with Alexis and your solo stuff was really a new frontier. But was there anybody that gave you that feeling, coming from the Canadian scene or the punk scene, that made you feel like there's something familiar here, even though this is happening on a level that I want to be at?
Well, I think what was really great was where I grew up, right? I grew up in St. Catharines, which an hour from Toronto, an hour from Buffalo, a place where a lot of Canadian bands that I was watching on Much Music would come and play. So I got to see a lot of these people who I, grew up watching on the television, wondering how I could, find my way to do this. And then I would, on a Friday night, I'd go to the Hideaway and see Thrush Hermit, and that's when I first saw Joel Plaskett in real life, and I was like, who is this lanky bastard, or seeing Sloan play at Brock University, or so many other bands from that early 90s, sort of like, Canada's response to grunge or whatever, right? Because that was my thing when I was younger. Before I was a teenager, I was so invested.
Alice in Chains.
Yeah, Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and stuff like that. But then as I became a teenager and I started to be able to go to shows myself, I wasn't going to see those bands, although I did get to go see Pearl Jam when I was young with a friend's dad, and that was amazing. But it was a lot of that. It was a lot of the Canadian bands from the early 90s, mid 90s that were coming through St. Catharines. I was so grateful to see. And then being able to go up to Toronto with like a friend's older brother and get to see big shows, it all just sort of like got the ball rolling on. Now, in no way, shape, or form did I think that I was going to be able to do it myself, but it was like a really good one. I'll tell you, when I first met the guys in Monine, my band before Alexis Helicon, we got to open for them in St. Catharines, and I remember they were coming from across Canada tour, and I just thought that was unbelievable that this band from Brampton, Ontario had gotten to tour. And I thought, okay, well, they're doing it. There's got to be a way for me to do at least that, because to me, that was all I wanted. I just wanted to go and play. I wanted to write my own music, and I wanted to go play. Whatever happened, happened. I had no grand delusions of stardom, or, I'm from St. Catharines. It's not a hotbed for rock and roll, although Neil Peart is from there, rest in peace. So it wasn't like this, I'm watching Much Music thinking I'm going to be on there. But the passion for writing and performing has always been there.
And these people that, like you said, Monique, that made you go, I can play though. Like I can go out and play.
Yeah.
And touch the Pacific and touch the Atlantic, like that's doable.
It's all I wanted to do.
Yeah. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the songs a little bit. I hope people don't mind getting into some of the minutia, but in my experience, my best songs either come right away or they take like years.
Right.
What stories do you remember about the writing of some of these songs? Any stories that stand out from sometimes in terms of the writing?
Well, I think the sort of bridge between a bunch of these songs that I had written in late years of high school and into my early 20s, mixed with the songs that I started to write as I started to tour and experience this life that I wanted to live, right? So a song like Coming Home or Hello, I'm in Delaware, those don't happen without me touring, right? I remember writing the line about Lincoln, Nebraska in Lincoln, Nebraska, because I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, And I thought,
it's cool songwriting sounding
right, and I thought, well, and to be fair, I didn't have a very good day in Lincoln, Nebraska, so that's why the line, I've been to Lincoln, Nebraska, and it ain't where shit comes from. Doesn't really have anything to do with Lincoln, Nebraska. That's called being on tour, and some days are awful. But so when I think back to those songs, I think about the tunes like the traveling songs, just being my reaction to again, living this life, or starting to try to live this life that was all I wanted. And then as a response to that, realizing that it's not all going to be glitz and glamour, you know? And it's like anything else, there are good days and there are bad days. So I think about songs like that, but then I go back to some of the ones that are, like, there's a song called Day Old Hate on the record that I wrote when I was in high school, and when I sing it now, it makes so much more sense to me as a 45-year-old man than it ever did when I was a 16, 17-year-old, whenever I would have started to write that song.
How so?
It's just one of those songs that when I look at the lyrics, I don't know how I would have related to what I was trying to say as a teenager. Like, that song feels like I have lived such a long life of pain and discomfort. And I laugh about it, but I sing it now and it resonates with me because I've lived, right? So that's one of those ones where I don't know necessarily where that one came from back then, right? Whether it was me experimenting with just sort of trying to be a little more esoteric or stream of consciousness or something like that, you know? I was developing, or I was trying to teach myself how to write still, you know?
I mean, that was going to be a follow-up is there any songs from that time that you still relate to in a way that surprises you, and that's your answer right there?
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's a couple on it that I don't really, that don't make sense to me, but you know that's just how songwriting goes. And then, to be honest, like, I guess I wasn't, the thing I was not prepared for, and still have, I think I'm still quite surprised by it, is how deeply connected people felt to what I was saying, you know? I did not think that's what was going to happen.
Well, I've heard you say, feels like the album belongs to fans,
Yeah.
and it's felt like that for a long time. And that's one thing I wanted to ask, especially for young artists here, or a lot of artists who never get to make something that connects in that way. How does it feel when it's no longer, could you describe that, when it's no longer yours and it belongs to other people? What is that?
Yeah, I think it's been a long journey for me with that statement too, because I think I was resentful of that for a lot of years as well, you know? But I think that has a lot to do with just growing up in the music industry and dealing with a lot of the stuff that comes on top of trying to just make art, especially making art on your own terms for yourself, you know? So when I think about a song like Saber Scissors, which when I wrote it specifically about an event in my life, and it was, you know, I was writing it from the perspective of, I was trying to say to somebody that I didn't want them to try to shape me into who they wanted me to be, you know? But when that song came out and sort of became this, I don't know what you want to call it, like a bit of a phenomenon, like I just never thought that was going to get on the radio or, you know, much music or played in shopping malls and things like that. The idea of what that song was for me lost all meaning. But then what happened is other people started coming up to me and telling me what it meant to them, where, like, the first time somebody told me that it helped them stop cutting themselves, that was a very strange thing for me to handle, because I was like, that's not what it's about, you know? And I was young and I was naive and I didn't realize that it didn't need to be about that for that person, right? Now I've had many conversations with people over the years about that and about how it's helped with self-harm, and I've learned to let that go and also be so proud of that something like that has been able to sort of help people cope, you know? But I think through the process of it becoming kind of successful or popular, I started to resent that song. I stopped playing it altogether. I'd get in fights with people about it. People would yell, why aren't you playing that song? And I'd be like, I don't want to, you know? And I've always been that way. I've had many arguments with many people that like my music and people who don't like it. Why don't you play this song? Well, I only play the songs that I feel good about in the moment, right? If I don't feel connected to a song, I'm not going to play it for you. If you want to come see me play, the best version of me that you're going to get is me playing the songs that I want to do right now. You do not want me running through the motions, singing you a song that I don't feel connected to. You know?
Which is valid.
Yeah, and I know some people don't agree with that, and I'm completely fine with it. And you can, you know, I remember getting into an argument with a guy who's doing an interview for a newspaper piece, and he was like, "Are you going to play Sacred Scissors?" And I said, "No." And he was very upset with me. I didn't play it. But you know what I mean? So that kind of thing started to happen with that record, where I think also because I was so busy, I was touring so much with Alexis, I didn't understand what was happening with this other thing, you know?
It's interesting because I was listening to your most recent album again too, and it feels like maybe informed by this kind of experience, there is room in those songs for it to mean different things. So do you find that that shaped how you write? Like you write maybe leaving a bit more room for people to put their meanings on the song?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I've sort of realized is that there's a couple of things that happen when I'm writing and have evolved. But when I made that first record, it was this way of writing that I felt comfortable with, where I was just directly writing about something that was happening to me, right? I was attempting to write myself out of whatever was troubling me. And if you listened to it, great. If you didn't, I wasn't concerned. But I think as life has gone on, I've tried to, I don't want to say simplify it, but a lot of the things when I end up, if you ask me about a certain song, it's something I've been pining over for months or years, and I'm trying to answer an unanswerable question for myself in a 3.5-minute song with a catchy chorus, So I kind of started to realize that I could write in a way that it does that for me still, It appeases that sense of therapy that I'm looking for. But then I can also write it in a way, and this is 20 years of talking to people about these songs and understanding how relatable music and writing can be for other people, especially for people who don't seem to have the words to describe how they're feeling. And you start to understand that it's not for everybody, right? And like I said, it's like you and I, maybe we didn't realize this when we were younger, but it is a true gift to be able to write yourself out of your own head.
Huge.
And so you have these conversations with people, and they tell you that this song was played at their wedding, or this song we played at our son's funeral, and you start to realize that if you're lucky, it becomes way bigger than you.
Yeah, it goes from being a curse to actually a huge gift.
Absolutely.
The best thing you can do, really,
Yes.
as a songwriter. You brought up Coming Home, and you got lines in there about the Rockies, Saskatoon. I've seen you play that song, and I've seen the way audiences in Canada respond to those lines. We're a nation that, because America's next door, we're starved to see ourselves reflected. And it just makes me think of you, fast forward 20 years from that album, you're part of this lineage now of songwriters that have done that, right? Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, and so on. So getting to this point, how does it feel to be a part of that lineage that gives Canadians something that, we're starved for, to hear our own stories and that we're proud of as well?
Yeah, I think when I wrote that song, I wasn't even
thinking about
No,
that.
of course
Sure.
not. I was writing that song about my first few times driving across this impossible country. Because it is. Anybody who's toured this country, especially in the winter, understands that if you make it across, it's a real feat. And I've done it probably 40 times now, and every time I'm doing it, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Yeah, let's tour Canada in February. Every 2 years. But I think when I wrote it, I knew that I was going to, you have to make a choice to say Saskatoon in a song. That's a choice you have to decide. You write that down, you go, I have to believe in this for the rest of my life. I love Saskatoon. That's not a dig. It's just an interesting word. So when I think about myself writing it, that's what it is. It's me touring. It's me learning how to, like I said earlier, learning how to live this life. And never in a moment thinking that it would connect with people and then become this song that people can sort of feel proud about the country they're from. But now, yeah, like I said, I just feel like I'm part of the inspirational relay race, you know?
Neil Young, Joni, Gord, you know what I mean?
Like those, you know, Neil was a North Star for me when I was younger, and really deciding to try to write strictly from my heart and be honest and simple, and just try to like create a song out of this feeling that was, you know, that I couldn't describe. You know, and I feel like Neil was always, at least the records I was listening to him was raised on, or, you know, Neil was just so simple in the way he delivered his sentiment, you know? It's gonna take a lot of love to change the way things are. It can't be more simple than that, right? And I thought, but it resonates, it's so powerful. And if you mean it, it doesn't matter how simple it is. I kind of started to feel that, you know? And then of course, Gordy, being such a beacon in my life for those years that I got to spend with him and have him as a friend and have him as a person I could speak to about this life. You almost kind of discover this responsibility to it all, right? I think that's part of it too, is that as the years went by and I realized that it was working and I was doing this thing that I wanted to do, the work becomes a responsibility to the fact that it has gone well, right? And I feel that deeply still to this day. Like, I understand how easily this could not have happened, you know?
I've always seen you express that gratitude and that sense of responsibility about this is coming from St. Catherine's, like this is not an opportunity that I take lightly, kind of thing. And then also to be part of this lineage is also not something to take lightly, of great songwriters from this country.
Yeah, like I'll never forget standing in the studio in Hamilton, watching Gord sing his part on Sleeping Sickness, and you know, where I recorded, there's no control room, no vocal booth. It was just an open concept studio. So, you know, Gord's standing there, and I'm sitting on a couch in front of him, watching him sing a song that I wrote. You know, I remember being like, I wrote a second verse, you can change it. Feel free to change it. And he was like, no, I like what you wrote. And that's good. And I remember watching him sing that part, and I just was staring at him thinking, well, this is how you have to be. You know what I mean? It's like, this man has come down and given me his time because he feels connected to this. And I'm looking at him going, if I get a chance, I have to be responsible. I have to take the work seriously because it's important, you know? And you understand that, again, you have to appreciate the luck of it all, right? You do. You can work as hard as you want, but you have to appreciate and be responsible to the fact that things happened, you know, and a door opened.
This time is flying by. I want to make sure there's a little bit of time for people's questions. So a couple things just about independence, I guess, on that theme. So one, and this is something I always tell young artists, like if you make something, you work really hard, you make something, you also work really hard to have the courage to put it out, and then people connect with it. Your reward is people will say, great, do it again. Right. And do it again, like quick actually.
Yeah.
You experienced that in a unique way because you had two acts that were connecting. So could you talk a little bit about the challenge of success in terms of, I mean, you were putting out an album a year with two acts, touring like mad, you know, behind those, because you feel grateful, because there's a responsibility to take, you know, that opportunity seriously. For the young artists here, talk a little bit about that challenge of success.
Well, first of all, what was amazing about the City and Color side of things was that we did take the chance and start a label to put it out on our own in order to control it, right? First of all, because I was in this other band and doing a lot, we didn't want to just hand it over to somebody and then have all of those different hands coming and trying to get me to, you know, it was like, we're going to do what I feel comfortable doing, you know? But once it became successful, I it's not that I ever felt sort of pressure to keep it going. What was great about it was that I was writing relentlessly, you know. So I was ready to make another record. By the time I was done touring with Alexis and Sometimes had come out, I was ready to make another record. I was writing.
You were in a zone.
I was writing constantly on the road, you know. It was like, okay, so I'll go in and make another one. But the most beautiful part about being independent for 20 years and having bet on ourselves and it worked was that the only pressure I have ever felt is the pressure I put on myself. You know, no one has ever told me that I have to go and make a record. I've just always felt the need to, you know. And I don't think Joel or Trish, my longtime managers and friends, they've never needed to say it's time to make a record because they know that I feel that responsibility to create, and that it's a part of me more than it is my job. It is a part of me. Making music is a part of me. I understand that now, you know. So, but I think what started to really become the pressure that I started to feel was both bands, right? And that was just because I was one person, you know? And I did feel so grateful that it was all working, that I really wanted to try to give all of myself to all of it, to all the people that were there to listen and wanted to come see me play and wanted to come see Alexis play. And I just felt, again, because I felt so grateful to the moment and to the idea that it was working, I decided to test the tensillary strength of my body to see how far I could drive myself, you know, which was quite far, I think, but also maybe I would have appreciated the mental health conversation a little more when I was younger, you know?
Well, you know, okay, so this is a follow-up that I had, which is that when you do things independently, it's exciting and you have that autonomy that you're talking about, but there's often no blueprint.
For sure.
So there's no other way to know besides trial and error. So could you share any tips you have about how to make choices, how to make decisions when there's no blueprint?
Well, okay, the first thing that I usually say to people when they ask me that now is, and I think you'll understand what I mean when I say this, is I think the first thing you need to do as an artist or as a young artist, you need to figure out what you want out of this. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be a songwriter? Do you want to be a rock star? Do you want to be just a guy in a band or a girl in a band? Do you want to be a producer, right? You need to discover that. And it won't present itself. Sometimes it'll present itself 10 years in. But I was lucky that from day one, I knew that I wanted to be a songwriter. I wanted to sing those fucking songs, you know? And I didn't want anyone to tell me what they thought. I was going to live and die with my decisions, you know? I don't know where that comes from, but that's what I wanted, and I drove towards that. And I, again, was so lucky to have an incredible support system around me that took care of a lot of the shit on the exterior and let me focus on that one thing, you know?
I think that's the major key, because also if you're not clear on what you want, there'll be all sorts of pressure to be something other people...
And you'll let the outside noise in,
yeah.
You know? And that's okay too, like I said, if you don't... I mean, there's great producers, great writers, great managers, great agents. Everybody has something good to say. But for me, it was always like, I knew what I wanted it to be, you know?
Okay, you brought up your managers and friends, Joel, Trish. One thing I've noticed with you over the years, you got the same people around you.
Yeah.
So could you talk about two things? One, that approach, because it's not everybody that takes that approach.
Right.
And maybe two, if you want to talk a little bit about some of those folks that you...
Sure, yeah. Well, Joel and Trish, who are my managers, I've known since I was 16 years old. I met Trisha via her younger cousin in high school, and she was cool and liked good music, so we became friends. Joel I met when he was working at Sam the Record Man in St. Catharines, Ontario. I was working at the Foot Locker, and I said...
Those are, by the way, elite high school.
Oh man, yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I also worked at the Silver City Cinema, and I worked at the Sunrise Record and Tape, and I worked at the West 49.
Fire career.
All in the same wall. But Joel was a little older than me, and so was Trish, but Joel was the guy who, he went to Sam, because Sam's, if you liked music, because he had a special section that he like tried to order in all the hardcore records that you couldn't get and stuff like that. So Joel, what's popping today, you know? And I said to him one day, I said, I have a band, you should come see my band play. And that was Helicon Blue. And he came to see that band, and I was probably 19, maybe around then. And Joel came up to me afterwards, and he said, I'll help you. And I was 19, I'll be 45 in a couple of months. So those two have been the pillars in this whole thing for me. They've helped me navigate all of the waters that I've been sailing through all these years. And again, Joel and I decided to start Dine Alone to put this record out as a way to be in control of it. But yeah, that's those two people are two of the most important people in my life, because they've been with me since the beginning, and we grew together. We all learned how to do what we do together, right? They didn't know how to be managers or label owners or any of that. We just all figured it out. And then, you know, my road crew, there's been a lot of changes there just because some people come and go, but like, you know, Juice has been with me for 16 years. Started as just a merch kid, and now he's tour manages Alexis and City and Color. Stu, our sound guy, has been with me for 20 years. This year was his 20th year working for me. The thing about that's important to me is what I realized when I started touring was that these people are your family. You don't get to see your family for long periods of time, especially when I was younger. You know, you're out 250 days of the year. I was never interested in this idea of becoming something where I walk into a room and sit by myself and I go up on stage and then I leave. You know, I wanted it to be this familial experience where we could celebrate together, you know, lose together, right? Because it was just, I didn't want to experience it by myself, you know? And to be able to work and tour the world with people that I love and that are my friends, like Vanessa Hines, who sent us a message on MySpace in 2003 asking if she could take Alexis on Fire's picture. She still tours with me and takes my picture, you know?
It's enormously gratifying to have that growth with those same people and to establish that family.
Yeah, me and Vanessa call it mutual believing, right? You just want people that will believe in what you want, and you want to be able to believe in them as well, and you want to be able to celebrate it together, you know? And it's funny to be here talking about independence and all of that, because it does feel a little lonely, but I also want to make clear that in no way have I done this independently. It has been with an absolute village of people who come and gone, and the people that are still with me. You know, Trish is still listening to me complain about something at 3 o'clock in the morning if she has to, but she's still the first person I send a musical idea to, you know?
And the growing together is so gratifying too, right? Like you talked about, from merch to tour managing, from putting out one record to running a whole label and management and all that.
Well, the Warped Tour that when we shared the bus, Alexis and you guys,
yeah,
that was Juice's first tour with Alexis, you know? Well, and he's been with me ever since, and just like went from, like, again, he grew and learned how to do what he does now just by being around, right?
Okay, I want to save time for people's questions, so just to wrap things up, you're playing sometimes front to back in a month.
Yes.
What are you most looking forward to in that experience?
Finishing that. No, I'm actually, it's been strange. I've been trying to rehearse and relearn all the songs again, and been listening to that record here and there. And first of all, I'm shocked at how much of a baby I sound like. You know, I definitely sound like a child, which I am. I think when I recorded it, but I think I'm looking forward to allowing myself to be proud of what that record became, you know, and celebrating with all the people that seem to love it, and just like in the truest way possible, sing those songs for all of the people who have ownership of them now.
Amazing. Dallas Green, folks.
Yes. Dallas Green and Shad, yes. An amazing, in-depth, and worldly conversation. I'm right here, guys. So we'll turn up the house lights, please, so we can see everybody. Great conversation, guys. Did you enjoy it so far? So far, very good, eh? Very good energy. And Dallas, you mentioned still sounding like a boy, or you did back then. Well, I'm going to bring you back to your past, okay?
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're going to like this one. All right, my friend, go ahead.
Thank you so much. What's up, dude?
Hey.
What's going on, man?
How are you?
I just want to say I'm good. Yourself?
Good.
I've loved you for the past 18, 20 years, man. Just want to say I'm glad. I'm so happy that you promote pushing your songs to your fans, because I love that. I've truly made Bring Me Your Love my therapy session for the last 18 years. I have it tatted on me.
Beautiful.
I love it. My band's actually recording at Catherine North.
Awesome.
It's such a cool place.
Yeah.
My question is when did you decide to pick that place?
You know what it was? I met, I was at, I can't remember where the Junos were, but it was the year that Sometimes had won, and I was introduced to Dan Aiken, who used to play guitar in Junk House, Canadian rock legends.
Tom Wilson.
Tom Wilson, and Dan said, "I really love your voice. I have a studio in Hamilton. It's he loved Daniel Lanois, and it was sort of inspired by Daniel Lanois' love of making these open concept studios and just having the band play, and you're just, everyone's a part of it." And
that's so awesome.
He gave me a business card. He said, "If you ever want to come record, come check it out."
It's such a beautiful place.
Yeah, I went to see it, and I was it was just, especially because I had been writing these songs that I felt like were going to be quite real sounding, live sounding.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a beautiful confluence of events where Dan introduced himself. We got along really well, and rest in peace, Dan. But that's it.
I love how you said you did the open room singing.
Yeah.
We do 4-part harmonies in our band. We did a moment where the four of us stood around mics in the middle of the room.
Oh, nothing
Such
better
a
than that.
Beautiful sound of that.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah, love that record. Love all your work, man. Awesome to meet you.
Thanks, pal.
Thank you so much. I lost my second question. Where are you? There you are, yes. Your name again?
My name is
Chloe. Nice to meet you, Chloe. Stand up so the guys can see you.
Hi, Chloe.
Hi, Dal.
How are ya?
I'm good. How are you? Long time no see.
Full disclosure, I know Chloe.
You gotta keep them guessing. So, Dal, obviously you know how much of an impact your music has made on me through my entire life, and I myself have wanted to be a songwriter since I was a little girl, so I'm finally stepping into that world, and I just figured you're the best person to get this advice from, but what comes first for you, the words or the melody?
Honestly, it can be either, and I think you just got to be aware of both. That's the best thing I can say. Like how Shad said earlier, how some songs will just appear, and some songs will take months or years to present themselves. And I think over the years I've realized that you don't have to force it. I mean, you can. Some people work really well that way, but for me, it's just always being aware of you see a word and it makes you feel something. Write it down. You think something, write it down, because you might not, that might not be the lyric, but it could be the start of the sentiment you're looking to describe in whatever the song becomes, And then even with the melody, right? You might just be singing gibberish, but the melody might be the thing that dictates where the song goes. So just be aware of both, and sometimes they'll come together, right? Do you agree with me?
I really like that. Be
Yeah.
aware of both. I've never heard it put quite that way, but
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Does that help? Okay. Oh, God, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Thank you for your question, Chloe. Okay, back here, guys. Sorry, I know it's hard to see because the lights are really bright. Back here, we have a really insightful and in-depth question based on the inspiration from the chat today from Jess.
Hi, Dallas.
Hi, Jess.
Quick question. You mentioned that you solve a lot of your own problems through writing, and a lot of the time you feel your lyrics more deeply years later after you wrote them. I was curious if you're ever writing songs that aren't from your perspective, or you're looking for other perspectives that aren't your own to write songs about? And how do you gain inspiration from that?
Yeah, I think I have done that. There's a lot of songs of mine that are from, you know, I think my first instinct is to dig deep inside and try to use it as the tool to help myself, because it's been so beneficial to me in my life, and I think I would have been doing that had anyone listened or not. But there's a bunch of songs I have that you just hear about something and you're like, oh, I want to write a song about that. Like, I have a song called The Way It Used to Be, which was a B-side on a record, and I was talking to somebody. I'll just give you an example. I was talking to somebody years ago, and we were on a street, and they pointed at a house, and the house it was a nice house, and it looked, you know, like somebody lived there. And this person was a house builder and was telling me, you know, that there's something really, really sad about that house. And I'm like, well, what is it? And he was like, well, the man who owns it has owned it for 30 years, and his wife left him 20 years ago for something he did. And he moved out of it, and he's kept the house, and he keeps it perfectly in order in the hope that one day he'll get back with her and they'll move back into the house. So of course, what did I do? I was like, I gotta write a sad song about that. You know? So if you listen to a song called The Way It Used to Be, that's what it's about, right? But as soon as I heard that story, I was like, I can write a fucking sad song about this. You know? Or, so there's a lot of ones like that. Like, I could probably pick another one, but usually it starts with just something that's on my mind. You know, I gotta get something off my chest. And then, again, being aware of the lyrics or the melody, sometimes it can evolve and turn a corner from where you originally started the sentiment, but most of the time it's just, I'm just trying to have a conversation with myself.
I love that. And it evokes emotion. Sorry guys, now I'm over here. Hey, right here. Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Sorry, I just move it around because there's so many great, powerful, and insightful questions in this room. You have amazing fans and amazing support. Melissa, you ready for your question? Okay, let's do it.
Hi, thank you so much for this panel. I really enjoyed the discussion. My name is Melissa. My artist name is Mel. I'm an emerging songwriter, singer-songwriter in the Toronto area right now. And I'm in the early years of my career, and I'm really focused on building a vehicle of some kind of platform, some kind of way to get my music out there and my story. And it's really made me think about my journey, but also my role model's journey. And your music is music that has really inspired a lot of my songwriting. And I was wondering if you can think back to those early years, if there was any figure that came into your journey at any point that really kind of changed or like pivoted. I don't know if it was your path or your perspective, if there's any person that comes to mind that you could speak to.
Oh yeah, man, there's a lot of them, I think. I've been very lucky to have had a lot of interactions over the years with again, different artists. I think Gord is probably the number one just because of where he was in his musical career and life when I met him, you know, and I'll never forget. He came. This is something I've held on to since this day. But when he came down to Hamilton to Catherine North to record, he had driven from Kingston that morning. What a beauty, right? He was like, yeah, this wasn't even in Ontario or Toronto. He was like, yeah. So he drives 4 hours from Kingston. And he gets there before me, which was very embarrassing. I remember getting to the studio, and his car was already there, and I thought, fuck. But he had been up at this farm in Kingston, and he was telling me about this old man who had the farm over from them, and he was helping them in the field and talking to this guy. And Gord was asking me, he was like, why are you still out here doing this? He was an older guy, like tilling the soil, and he said to Gord, he was like, well, because it's work that I understand, you know? And and then Gord like said it to me, and then he was like, right? And I was like, of course, you know. He was like, and he started using that as his thing. It's like, I do this because it's work I understand, you know? And I've always felt very, very close to that statement, because like I said to Shad earlier, and we've been talking about, it's like, I was thankful that when I was younger, I realized that this was something I wanted, you know? And it's not that I wanted to be on a panel talking about myself, is that writing and singing and making music was something I understood, right? There's a lot about life I don't understand. I'm terrible at math, you know? Right? But it was like something that I just believed that I could understand, you know? And when Gord said that to me on the day that he was there, sort of solidifying that what I was doing was good, you know? At least in his eyes, he was like, I'll contribute to this because I believe in you, you know? It was like, I'll never forget that. I've held on to that, you know, it was a long time ago now, but I'd be remiss to not use that as my example, right?
Wonderful.
But again, it was because we were able to connect on that level, right? You meet a lot of people in this business that you're like, well, that guy's not for me. Which is fine too, right? You have to understand that. Your music's not going to be for everybody, your personality's not going to be for everybody, you're not going to mesh with everybody. If you want that, you're doing the wrong thing. But if you can find a place to write something, create something from your heart, and you feel like it's the best representation of you, the rest is like sort of out of your control, you know? You just gotta believe in that.
And in that, Dallas, there was so much emotion, I would say. It was like your coming to moment. You were kind of like, okay, wait, this is my calling. This is what I'm meant to do. Leading us into Robin's question.
Okay.
What's your question, my love?
Thank you. Hi, Dallas and Shad. First of all, Shad, I want to say you did a really nice job keeping the conversation flowing. Really good questions. I felt very nice that. Second, the fit goes so insanely hard. Like,
Pardon?
that suit goes so hard.
Oh, thank
My
you very
God.
much.
So, sorry. My question is, I'm someone who's like super ruled by their emotions. I find sometimes it's almost overwhelming. I was going to ask you, as like a songwriter, essentially, do you find that you have like one emotion that is quite consistent in your day-to-day, and does it help or hinder you at all as an artist and songwriter?
Yeah, I think I've worked on it, but I definitely have a history of celebrating the negative, you know, instead of the positive, right? I have a hard time seeing, like if we talked for longer, I would tell you, I think about the times that I felt like I was passed over or failed more than the times that I've stood and played in front of thousands of people, or, you know?
Yeah.
And again, going back to the paradox of sort of like feeling like I should get to the finals every year, but also thinking I might not even make the play-in tournament, you know? It's like that. That's something I've tried to work on as I've gotten older, and just to give myself a bit more of a break, you know? Because I think you can, especially if I do get overwhelmed very easily, and it tends to go down instead of up, you know? So it's just been about trying to break through that and push past the thing that, the sort of roadblock, you know? And just kind of break through it and understand that the down period is only there for a minute, you know?
Fantastic. So with that, please give us your loudest applause for Shad, for Dallas, and Dallas Fiction. Yeah!
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. That was incredible. Incredible. Fantastic. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm sure you did. I hope you are left feeling fulfilled, that your cups are now full, inspired, maybe a little bit more emotionally balanced, but also to always learn to bet on yourself. Some really incredible tidbits of advice from Shad, and of course, Dallas Green. All right,